welcome to Golden Flame Stars. Close your eyes and drift back to an era where love was written in the stars and captured on golden film. The 70s and 80s gave us legendary stars who did not just play roles, they breathed life into our souls, carving their names into the very granite of our collective memory. Now, over 40 years later, their timeless glances and iconic stories still echo in our hearts, reminding us of a time when the silver screen was a window into a world of pure, unadulterated glamour. Join us as we revisit these beloved icons to see how time has touched the faces, music that once defined a generation, and to uncover what lay beneath the brilliant surface of their fame. We begin with the man who became the ultimate symbol of strength and sensitivity, Christopher Reeve. With his divine handsomeness and soulful, yearning eyes, Reeve became an eternal romantic icon in films like Somewhere in Time and Superman. He defined a generation of cinema with an image of timeless devotion, standing as a pillar of grace that seemed entirely unbreakable. Yet, even as he soared across the screen, there was a depth in his gaze that hinted at a spirit far more complex than the heroes he portrayed. He was the golden boy of a golden age, but beneath the cape and the camera lights, there were whispers of a weight he carried. A sense of impending destiny that would eventually demand a courage far beyond the reach of any Hollywood script. Beside him in that dreamlike landscape stood Jane Seymour, a woman of ethereal beauty, graceful presence, and a delicate English charm that felt as though it belonged to a more elegant century. As Elise McKenna, her luminous performance gave the screen a haunting tenderness that made her love stories feel entirely timeless. She was the portrait of Victorian grace, caught in a modern lens, a face that millions looked upon as the ultimate ideal of romance. But behind that porcelain perfection and the spotlight's glow, the industry was shifting, and the roles that defined her were part of a world that was slowly beginning to fade into the mist of nostalgia, leaving us to wonder what hidden struggles were masked by her poise. Then there was Robin Wright, whose delicate beauty, pure gaze and dreamlike innocence made her the perfect princess of 1980s romance. In The Princess Bride, her role as Buttercup captured the fantasy of true love, with a graceful tenderness and a quiet strength that resonated with audiences of all ages. She was the quintessential maiden of the era, a symbol of hope and purity in a decade that was often loud and brash. Yet, the transition from a fairy tale princess to the complex figures she would later inhabit hints at a hidden transformation. A path from innocence to power that few could have predicted during those early sun-drenched years of her stardom. These faces were the architecture of our dreams, the pillars upon which the grandeur of Hollywood was built. We saw the brilliance, the smiles, and the effortless magnetism of stars like Robert Redford, with his golden smile and quietly magnetic presence, and we felt the emotional depth of Barbra Streisand, whose vulnerability made her love stories linger for generations. But as we look back, through the soft focus of the past, we must ask ourselves what was truly happening when the cameras stopped rolling. What hidden pain and what looming shadows were waiting just off stage in an era of such incomparable grandeur? Every light casts a shadow, and it is within those shadows that the true story of the Golden Flame Stars begins to emerge. As the morning mist cleared over the backlots of the late 70s, a new breed of stardom began to take shape, one that blended the ruggedness of the past with a sensitive, almost poetic vulnerability. This was the era of the leading man, who wasn't afraid to show the cracks in his armor, and the leading lady who demanded more than just a place in the frame. Ryan O'Neal, with his blonde good looks and clear blue eyes, became the poster child for this shift. Alongside Ally McGraw in Love Story, he helped create a cultural phenomenon that defined youthful devotion and the crushing weight of heartbreak. They were the golden couple of a new generation, their natural beauty and effortless elegance making them the most watched faces in the world. Yet, the path to such astronomical fame was often paved with unspoken pressures. For O'Neal and McGraw, the sudden elevation to icons of romance meant that the world expected their real lives to mirror the tragic perfection of their characters. A facade that grew increasingly difficult to maintain as the gritty reality of the industry began to seep into the edges of their gilded existence. While some thrived in the spotlight, Others found that the transition from a teen idol to a serious dramatic force was a battlefield of expectations. Troy Donahue, the 1960s dream with his soft-featured beauty and all-American charm, found himself at the mercy of a studio system that often valued a handsome face over artistic growth. He was a defining face of romantic youth culture, but the very image that made him a star became a golden cage, a struggle shared by Leonard Whiting, whose delicate features and dreamy eyes as the definitive Romeo made him an overnight sensation. For these young men, the path to fame was a whirlwind of fan mail and flashbulbs, but behind the scenes there was a restless desire to be seen as more than just a pretty face in a frame. They were the idols of the past, grappling with the fleeting nature of youthful allure in a town that was always looking for the next best thing. By the time the 80s arrived, the landscape of stardom had expanded from the cinema screen into the very heart of the American home. Television stars like Tom Selleck and Don Johnson became more than just actors. They were lifestyle icons. Selleck, with his trademark mustache and relaxed confidence on Magnum PI, and Johnson, with his sun-bronzed ruggedness and designer cool on Miami Vice, defined the visual era. They carried the weight of massive ratings on their shoulders, balancing the demands of grueling production schedules with a public image that required them to be perpetually suave and unshakable. Yet, beneath the neon lights and the designer suits, there was a growing exhaustion. Johnson's lived-in masculinity was a far cry from the wild image the tabloids projected, and Selleck's athletic build masked the quiet desire for a lower-key personal life away from the relentless scrutiny of the lens. This was also the golden age of the miniseries, a grand format that allowed actors like Richard Chamberlain to become the king of the genre. As Father Ralph in The Thorn Birds, Chamberlain brought a romantic elegance and a deeply internal performance muse that earned him the adoration of millions. Alongside him, Brian Brown's rugged masculinity and Philip Anglim's refined, restrained presence added layers of complexity to the emotional world of the series. They were part of a sophisticated era of storytelling, where behind-the-scenes intrigues were often as dramatic as the scripts themselves. The industry was a labyrinth of contracts and reputations, where a single role could define a career for decades. For stars like James Brolin and Patrick Duffy, who combined polished charm with masculine warmth, the challenge was to remain relevant as the industry shifted toward more intense, psychologically charged narratives. In the midst of this glamorous chaos, a group of actors began to push the boundaries of what a leading man could be. Malcolm McDowell's dangerous charisma and James Woods' intense gaze brought a darker, more complex edge to the screen. They were the rebels, the ones who stood out through restless passion and psychological depth. Willem Dafoe, with his sharp angles and piercing intensity, turned unconventional features into a new kind of male magnetism, proving that the audience's appetite for complexity was growing. Even the classic romantics were evolving. John Cusack, with his soulful eyes and that iconic boombox, and John Cryer, as the symbol of sincere, unrequited love, captured a new kind of earnestness that spoke to the hearts of a younger generation. They were the faces of a world where love was no longer just a fairy tale, but a raw, unpredictable journey. As the decade progressed, the pressure to maintain the perfect facade only intensified. Behind the scenes of the most beloved romances, such as Somewhere in Time and Superman, the chemistry between stars like Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder was palpable, yet the physical and mental strain of these massive roles was beginning to show. Kidder's sparkling chemistry with Reeve turned their love story into a legend, music, but the intensity of the spotlight was a double-edged sword. The industry was a machine that demanded constant perfection, and as we look closer at the golden years of these icons, we begin to see the first flickers of the fire that would eventually consume some, while forging others into the legends they are today. The golden facade was still firmly in place, but the first whispers of the drama that would define their later years were already echoing in the quiet moments between takes. The transition from the sun-drenched peaks of superstardom to the shadowy valleys of personal struggle was rarely a gentle descent. In the world of the high-stakes film industry, the distance between being a god and being a ghost was often measured in a single heartbeat-stopping moment. For Christopher Reeve, That moment arrived on a spring day in 1995 during an equestrian competition in Virginia. The man who had convinced the world that a human could fly found himself grounded in the most agonizing sense, paralyzed from the neck down after a fall from his horse. This was the turning point that shattered the collective illusion of the era. The industry, which had marketed Reeve as the pinnacle of masculine perfection, was suddenly forced to confront a hero who was profoundly, heartbreakingly human. Behind the closed doors of the intensive care unit, the silence was deafening. The studios, once so eager to broadcast his every move, initially struggled with how to handle a star who could no longer walk the red carpet in the way they expected. It was here that the true character of the man emerged, as he traded his cinematic cape for the mantle of a tireless advocate, proving that his strength was never in his muscles, but in a spirit that refused to be extinguished by tragedy. While Reeve's drama was one of physical resilience, his co-star Margot Kidder faced a struggle that was far more ethereal and, at the time, far more stigmatized. The sparkling, witty Lois Lane, who had captured hearts worldwide, was harboring a tempest within her mind. In 1996, the world watched in stunned silence as the facade of the glamorous Hollywood actress was stripped away. Found in a state of distress after being missing for days, Kidder's battle with bipolar disorder became front-page news, but not in the compassionate way such a struggle might be viewed today. In the mid-90s, the industry often treated mental health as a scandal to be huzzaged up or a flaw to be ridiculed. The studios, fearful of anything that might diminish the commercial value of their icons, had long kept silent about her difficulties, leaving her to navigate the storm with very little institutional support. Her experience served as a haunting reminder that the bright lights of the set often cast the longest and darkest shadows over those who stood directly within them. For others, the drama was not found in a single event, but in the heavy weight of a secret kept for decades to protect a lucrative image. Richard Chamberlain, the man hailed as the king of the miniseries and the ultimate romantic lead of The Thorn Birds, lived a life of profound duality. At a time when the romantic leading man was expected to be the quintessential heteronormative heartthrob, Chamberlain had to carefully guard his private life to ensure his career remained intact. The studios and the press were complicit in this silence, understanding that the fantasy they were selling to millions of women depended on the perceived availability and traditional masculinity of their stars. Behind the closed doors of his private world, Chamberlain navigated the complexities of identity in a town that, for all its creative brilliance, was deeply conservative when it came to its bottom line. It was only much later in life that he could finally step out from behind the curtain, revealing the quiet strength it had taken to perform both on and off the camera for so many years. The 80s also saw the rise of Val Kilmer, a performer whose intensity was as legendary as his golden-haired beauty. From the high-flying world of Top Gun to the poetic depths of The Doors, Kilmer was a force of nature. However, his reputation for being difficult on set was often a misunderstanding of a deeply committed artist searching for truth in a business that frequently prioritized style over substance. His turning point came much later, not in the form of a scandal, but in a silent battle with throat cancer that eventually cost him the very voice that had defined his magnetic presence. The industry, once enamored by his fiery energy, became a quieter place for him. His journey from a brooding heartthrob to a man who communicates through the digital reconstruction of his voice and the profound honesty of his memoir is perhaps one of the most poignant transformations in Hollywood history. It represents the ultimate victory of the individual over the rigid expectations of the star-making machine. Even those who seem to escape the traditional traps of fame often face their own private reckonings. Julian Sands, the quintessentially English romantic lead of A Room with a View, was a man whose soul was as restless as the characters he portrayed. His love for the mountains and the untamed wilderness was his sanctuary, away from the artificial glow of the soundstages. Yet it was this very passion that led to his tragic disappearance in the San Gabriel Mountains, a narrative twist that felt as though it had been pulled from one of the poetic scripts he loved so much. The industry mourned not just an actor, but a man who had always sought a life that was more authentic and more daring than the one projected on screen. His legacy remains tied to that sense of refined mystery, a reminder that some spirits are simply too vast to be contained by the narrow borders of a film frame. As we look back at these turning points, we see a recurring pattern of a society and an industry that was often ill-equipped to handle the humanity of its idols. Whether it was the physical fragility of Reeve, the mental health struggles of Kidder, or the private identities of stars like Chamberlain, the Hollywood machine was designed to protect the image at all costs, often at the expense of the person behind it. The silence of the studios was not a gesture of kindness, but a calculated effort to preserve the value of their property. It changed these heroes, forcing them to find a different kind of courage. The courage to be broken, to be vulnerable, and eventually to be honest. These scandals and tragedies did not diminish their star power. Instead, they added a layer of profound depth to their legacy, transforming them from untouchable icons into symbols of the enduring human spirit that survives long after the credits roll and the lights go down. As the final credits roll on the 20th century and we find ourselves standing in the bright, clear light of 2026, the legacy of these golden icons takes on a new, more profound resonance. We look back not just at faces on a screen, but at the architects of our emotional history. Christopher Reeve, who left us at the age of 52, remains far more than a man who once wore a cape. He is the eternal symbol of a spirit that could not be broken. His enduring legacy lives on through his remarkable courage and his tireless advocacy for spinal cord injury research, proving that his most heroic work began when the cameras stopped rolling. Beside him in our memories, Jane Seymour, now 75, continues to captivate us with that same elegance that first made her a household name. She remains active on our screens, a living testament to the idea that true grace does not fade, it merely matures into something more luminous. Similarly, Robin Wright has completed a masterful transformation, evolving from the delicate princess of our youth into a powerful Hollywood queen. At 60, she is admired for her sharp elegance and her commanding presence as both an actress and a director, showing us that the strength we glimpsed in Buttercup was only the beginning of a magnificent journey. In the world of laughter and light, Billy Crystal, at 78, remains one of the industry's most admired entertainers. His quick wit and relatable charm helped define a generation of romantic comedy, creating a blueprint for the modern leading man that balanced humor with heart. We look at Ryan O'Neal and Ali MacGraw and see a love story that became a part of the world's shared DNA. Though O'Neal passed away at 82, he remains forever linked to the film that turned him into a romantic icon, while the 87-year-old MacGraw continues to be admired as a timeless style icon. Their story, much like the performances of Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand, reminds us of the power of chemistry. Redford, who passed away at 89, left a legacy that reaches far beyond his golden smile, serving as a champion for the independent filmmakers who now walk the paths he cleared. Streisand, at 84, remains a legendary force, a singer, actress and filmmaker whose influence is woven into the very fabric of global culture. The polished glamour of the 70s and 80s is preserved in the memories of stars like Lois Chiles and Margot Kidder. Chiles, at 79, is still remembered for the sophisticated charm she brought to the screen, while the warmth and spirit of Kidder, who left us at 69, ensures that her Lois Lane will never truly age. Meryl Streep, now 76, has confirmed her place as perhaps the most essential face of her genre, her luminous intelligence guiding her through one of the most accomplished careers in cinematic history. And for those who grew up in the neon glow of the late 80s, the soulful eyes of John Cusack and the gentle charm of Iron Sky remain symbols of a sincere, youthful devotion that defined an era of first loves. Cusack at 59 and Sky at 55 are living reminders of that earnest, intelligent romance that felt so vital and so real to a generation searching for its own voice. As we move through the landscape of the present day, we see the veterans who have shaped the industry through their dedication and versatility. Characters like Tony Danza and Patrick Duffy, who brought warmth and approachable masculinity to our living rooms, continue to be embraced by fans. Danza, 75, and Duffy, 77, remind us of a time when television was a unifying force, a shared experience that brought people together. James Brolin, at 85, and Tom Selleck at 81, still command respect with their magnetic presence, proving that the rugged charisma of the past has a permanent home in the modern world. Even those who work more selectively now, like Daniel Day-Lewis, who at 68 has made a striking return to the craft anemone, or Willem Dafoe, who at 70 remains as daring and experimental as ever, show us that the fire of artistic passion does not dim with age. It only grows more concentrated. We also pause to remember those who have recently taken their final bows, leaving the world a little less bright. Richard Chamberlain, the king of the miniseries, passed away in 2025 at the age of 91, leaving behind a legacy of romantic elegance that will never be replicated. Christopher Plummer, who worked almost until his passing at 91, and the enigmatic Val Kilmer, who left us at 65, remind us of the incredible range and depth that these stars brought to our lives. We remember Corey Parker and Julian Sands, whose poetic screen charms were taken from us far too soon, and the legendary James Garner and Troy Donahue, who defined different eras of the American leading man. Their marks on history are indelible, written in the light of the films that continue to find new audiences every single day. Finally, we look to the modern legends who have successfully bridged the gap between the icons of the past and the stars of today. Brad Pitt, at 62, remains a titan of the industry, his influence expanding through Plan B productions even as he continues to define what it means to be a Hollywood heartthrob. And Leonardo DiCaprio, who at 51 has navigated the journey from the boyish charm of Titanic to the rugged authority of his later years, stands as a testament to the enduring power of star power. He has moved through trends and transformations, yet he remains one of the most celebrated performers of his time. These are the faces that shaped our world, the voices that whispered of love and loss, and the spirits that continue to burn with a golden flame. They gave us more than just movies. They gave us a piece of themselves, and in doing so, they ensured that their stories would live on forever in the hearts of those who remember. Live. Golden Flame Stars. 2026 Global Wang. Spricking. Legacies Reigned and new milestones wretched as the world continues to celebrate the icons of the 70s, 80s and 90s. The year 2026 has brought both poignant farewells and inspiring new chapters for Hollywood's most enduring legends. From humanitarian breakthroughs to red carpet triumphs, here is the latest from the world of cinema royalty. Richard Chamberlain. A Year of Remembrance. 1 year after the passing of the king of the miniseries in March 2025, global tributes are pouring in. Fans and colleagues alike are revisiting his monumental performances in The Thornbirds and Shogun, celebrating a man who balanced a legendary public image with a deeply private, authentic life. Meryl Streep, a seven-figure legacy. In March 2026, the National Women's History Museum officially announced the Meryl Streep Educator Award. Following a massive multi-million-dollar donation from the actress, this initiative aims to preserve the stories of women who shaped history. The inaugural ceremony is set for November 2026, +2 Jane Seymour defining the new golden age at 75. The Somewhere in Time star stole the spotlight at the 2026 Hollywood Nominees Night, demonstrating that 70 is the new 50. Seymour's recent appearances have reignited conversations about longevity in film and her refusal to conform to traditional industry expectations, the Reeve legacy. A new generation scores the critically acclaimed documentary Superman, the Christopher Reeve story continues to break records in 2026. Christopher's son, Will Reeve, recently led a historic lighting of the Empire State Building, symbolizing the foundation's ongoing success in funding revolutionary spinal cord research. Leonardo DiCaprio. The producer's power now 51, DiCaprio is making waves in 2026, not just as a leading man, but as a dominant force in production. Industry insiders report his latest environmental project is slated for a major festival debut later this year, proving his star power remains as potent as ever. History is shaped not